So grateful to have you here, Jen Herley. My name is Jenny Douglas. I'm the hosting director for Revel. For those who are new to our platform, we're a burgeoning nationwide and increasingly global community for people, for anyone who identifies as a woman in midlife and beyond. And through both online events and in virtual events of all kinds, we get together, we create events, gatherings, revels, to educate, support, bear witness, and amuse one another. And really just, yeah, I mean, I think I have found as a 58-year-old woman that there's no way that I can't do it. I can't do life without my community. And it's been galvanizing to see Revel help women lay claim to ourselves in our full magnificence. So with that in mind, it is my great pleasure to welcome to Raging Gracefully, Dr. Gennifer Herley, who is the founder and executive director of TransNewYork, whose mission is to, quote, educate, empower, and enhance the lives of transgender, non-conforming and non-binary individuals globally through advocacy, community visibility, human and social services, advanced knowledge, and lifelong learning development of self. So thrilled to have you here, Dr. Herley, Dr. Jen Herley, who you said I can call you Jen. So thank you very much, from one Jen to another. And just really happy to have you here, and would love to learn a little bit more from you about what the services are that TransNewYork provides and how you came up with the idea to launch it.
So hi, and hi to everyone at Revel. So it really seems like a wonderful community. I've been doing lots of research. So I guess I'll start with your second part of the question, and how did I start, or why did I start? So I founded TransNewYork in 2018, June of 2018. That happens to be the time when I publicly came out as a transgender woman. I came out at the age of 56 years old. I'll be the big 60 in June. So I'm excited about that. Prior to TransNewYork, I had a whole life in, I call it BG, before Jen. So I had a whole life in plumbing manufacturing. But as a side gig, I was doing counseling. I was counseling people with gender identity issues while I had my own. And I was wrestling with my own. And it was really a wonderful process, because in speaking to people, they were able to help me and I was helping them at the same time. And, for no better words, I was in a bit of denial about my own self. But once I decided to come out in June 2018, I decided that I really needed to immerse myself in something permanently. And that was a nonprofit organization, because I loved my side gig. It was called the Better Life Counseling. It was all about helping people get a better life. I've been a person who's been involved with counseling my own self for a number of years. I truly believe it is personal development. So I immediately wanted to launch TransNewYork and see exactly what we can do. As part of that, when I was in the closet for, I don't know, about 30 years, the only real outlet I had was to go to conferences, and there were never any transgender conferences in New York. I found out why, because New York's a really expensive place to have a conference. So I decided to have a conference in 2019, which no other organization would ever do in a million years, because how expensive. We had it at the Hyatt in New York City. We had 350 attendees, keynote speakers, vendors, workshops. It was wonderful. But really, for me, the most important part of that was giving back. And I met somebody in the vendor section, people who were working at the conference, said, Jen, you have to meet this person. And he presented as a he didn't have, he looked like he was a man. He was presenting that way. And he said to me, he said, thank you. I've lived in New York for 30 years. I've been waiting for 30 years to come to a conference. And I said, that's wonderful. You're going to stay? He goes, well, I don't think so. You have to pass. No, you be my guest. I want you to stay. And he said, you know what? This whole thing has been such an emotional, overwhelming thing to be here for an hour. He goes, that's all I really needed. And with all the money I spent, and all what went into that conference. His story, amongst others, was just so heartwarming to me in some way that I could give back.
Mhm.
So that was sort of, my first sort of entrance into helping the community. Then mental health was a natural because I was already doing it. So I continue on the idea of helping people with their gender identity. And as you probably know, and I hope people in the audience know, it's a very complex thing to do. And I try and instill in the clients who speak to me that it's very complex. We need to make a plan, right? I always tell people that the best laid plans don't always work out, but a plan is a lot better than not having a plan.
Mhm. So what would be an example? I think that's so fascinating. What do you say next? Like what kind of plan should people be thinking about as they're working towards transitioning?
Well, you should really consider all the factors that are going to come all at once. And that is your social life, meaning with your own family, your friends, your extended friends. Professionally, it's going to affect you in some way, for good or for bad. And, most of the time, these things are more difficult. The emotional part of it, and I try and tell people that they should be flexible in their thought processes, because when I started, I thought it would be one way and it kind of went a little bit of a different way. And I think that's life. And this isn't a straight shot up, and hopefully it's never a straight shot down. And it's just like life, there's a lot of ups and downs in life, but this is just additive on it, because most of society, we live in a binary society. Most people just don't understand the idea of gender. When it comes to sexuality, people don't necessarily, like, you don't necessarily know if somebody's gay or a lesbian, but 9 times out of 10, you probably will figure out if somebody is either a trans woman, trans man, non-binary, non-conforming. So
It's such an interesting idea. And there's so many thoughts I have. One thought is I'm thinking back to that person who you met at your first conference, who really just, it seemed like in that moment, what that person wanted more than anything else was to be witnessed. And you witnessed that person, and just the value that comes with that, as you say, it's not a straight shot. It's not like you suddenly transition, right? It's a process.
Right.
And I also I'm one thing that's occurring to me is that, I'm 58. So it sounds like you are close in age to me. If you said you're going to be approaching 60 soon.
Yeah, I'm 59.
Oh, amazing. So do you feel, looking back, like, do you wish you'd transitioned earlier? Do you feel like you lost time, or do you see it differently?
No, I see it much differently. In fact, with the time, that's why I'm so immersed in what I'm doing, because I say I have to make up for lost time. But, I'm a true believer in people aren't ready. And this is what I try and preach to people who come see me, that you're not ready until you're ready. And all my experiences in life led me up to this. And, a lot of the younger Generation Z, they look at, their past life, or their past life as being dead. But I had a very good life as a male. I did. But I was torn. This is a much better life for me. I love being a woman. I everything about it I've dreamed about has come true.
I so appreciate your saying that you had a really good life as a male and you have a better life now. That isn't, I think, often the kind of assumption that those who aren't transgender might make, because I can imagine it's a lot of effort. It requires a lot of deep work to transition. So I can imagine certain people might think, who aren't in your situation or situations like yours, like, you wouldn't do it unless you were miserable, but you're not saying that you were miserable. You said,
I wasn't miserable, I was just torn. It was an idea of living 2 lives. I couldn't hide myself anymore. And I was having trouble controlling that message.
yeah.
And the worst thing for somebody who's transitioning or deciding to come out is for it to be too soon before you're ready. Because then you're reeling. I mean, you reel during this process anyway, trust me. especially at the very beginning. Everything's about acceptance, everything's about validation. But as you go, it changes. And, I've changed along the way. One of the things that's been kind of a challenge for me to take a look at myself, because I was male for 56 years, I was indoctrinated on everything being male. And my ideas about what a female were a bit off, frankly,
Can you give an example, Jen?
Well, I just think in terms of, perhaps the way, women dressed, all the time, and like, we'll talk about gender, but, well, this is gender women. So, gender is a continuum, it's not static. So think of it like the A train. The A train goes from, let's say, Riverside down to Coney Island, right? So there's like 45 stops in between, let's just say 40, whatever it is. But the point about that is the same goes for gender. There are parts of you, Jenny, that you may have some masculine, what people think are social constructs as masculine traits, or you're assertive, but you are a woman, but you can have those parts of you.
Right? Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's so interesting to think about. I'm thinking, as we're talking about growing up myself as a cisgender woman, my mother used to always say things like, sit like a woman, right? Or don't talk that way, don't talk too loudly. And then I remember hearing an interview with Jill Soloway, who I believe was the writer for the Transparent TV series. And if I'm remembering correctly, she talked about like when she was writing, she would, this is before, I don't know what, I'm not sure where she is in her gender identity spectrum, but at one point she definitely identified as a woman, but she would dress and take on the affect of a man to be able to be more focused as a writer. So all of these things that go into the way that we imagine our gender, it's so interesting. And I kind of want to ask you, like, what do you think trans people and people who identify as non-binary have to teach cisgender people?
Yeah, well, I think especially when I look at see, I love the idea of non-binary. I can't identify that way, but I love the idea of it because it takes gender and it blows it up. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because I think it's extremely restrictive if you think about it. Look what we're talking about. I teach sociology over at John Jay University, and I was just talking to my kids. I call them my kids. Anybody who's below 30 is my kids, but they're 19, 20. And I asked them, what social constructs, as a man or a woman do they feel? And two of the women in the class said that they get a hard time about the way they dress from their family, because they dress a little bit on the sort of what people would consider masculine side, and these are nothing more than social constructs. It's interesting what you said. So I got a PhD in organizational psychology. I used to work at a Fortune 100 company, American Standard was the name of the company, plumbing company. And I ended up doing a dissertation. The name of the dissertation was Perceptions of Role Conflict and Workplace Stress in Women Working in Male-Dominated Professions. And the reason that I came up with it at the time, I was married. I'll get into that, but I was married for 30 years. My ex-wife worked on Wall Street. So she would come home and share these, horrid stories with me about, and she was tough, about the treatment that she would get and the way people would talk to her. And then at our company, the CEO hired 3 women in very powerful positions. One was a global marketing person, one was a global position of sales, and the other one's communications. And the entire company, I have to tell you, I don't know about the entire, but a lot of people, both male and female, really disliked these women immensely. They used the B word about them, and none of them knew them. None of them knew any of them. And then I started to look at, at least 2 out of 3 women, and it dawned on me. You mentioned it before, like they had suits on, they had short hair, and it was almost like they were androgynous. And I thought to myself, wow, what a really odd thing that a woman can't be a woman. Like like, I think, that's why we do need a woman president, like, look, women are mothers. What could be better than a mother leading, company or a corporation?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
the United States.
I know I'm jumping around a bit. There's so much I want to talk to you about, but I am thinking, and I want to talk about also the work that
Yeah,
TransNewYork
we have to talk
does.
about
But
that.
I'm curious to know, before we get into the nitty gritty of what the services that you provide as the executive director of TransNewYork, do you think that you as a woman leader are leading TransNewYork differently than you would have when you identified as a man?
Interestingly enough, I would say probably yes and no. I think sometimes because I live that life, I sort of forget, you know what I mean, of who I am, and we have a board president, and her name is Stephanie Battolino, and she worked for New York Life, and she was a VP. She came out 20 years ago, and she wrote a book, Reflections of the Glass Ceiling from Both Sides.
Mm.
And she tells a story that she was, after she transitioned, she was in the meeting, and one of her good friends was in there, and she sort of stood up for herself and was saying things, and then the person sort of pulled her outside and said, Stephanie, how could you do that? And she said, what are you talking about? You know me for 20 years. This is what I always do. And she thought people were being transphobic, but they were actually being sexist.
Oh, fascinating. That's so layered.
So I have noticed a little bit of people not wanting to listen to me, but I just kind of plow forward. But I have seen where, people don't listen, or I get like different responses on email. And it's like, when I was a guy, no one ever, would ever do something like that. I'm not a small person. I mean, I'm smaller now, but back then I was a pretty big person. Nobody would want to say those things to me.
So interesting. So when Amy Levine was sharing with me about TransNewYork, she was talking about that one of the things your organization does is help people who are trans and non-binary with workplace readiness, and at the same time help corporations and workplaces figure out how they should be and ought to be, for the benefit of us all, more hospitable to employees and would-be employees who identify as trans and non-binary.
Yeah. So let me tell you about, we actually have 3 programs. I'll tell you about the other one, because I told you a little bit about the mental health, and they sort of all intersect with one another. Mm-hmm. So we have mental health, where we're helping people with their gender identity. We help their families. We help groups as well. The second component is our workforce inclusion training, which came out of my having a PhD in organizational psychology, and my associate Stephanie, who's done some training as well. So education is really the most important thing. And we really, as a community, as the transgender community, gender diverse, we need allies. We need people to go out and educate. That's why I'm so happy to be here. I want to speak to more organizations that are outside the trans community, because we're a very small sliver of society, 1 to 2%. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Right now we're living in a world of who knows anymore what the truth is, the way people are operating, and it's sad. It's really sad.
What are common mistakes, if you can think of them, that workplaces make that make it difficult for trans and non-binary employees to feel welcome and affirmed?
Well, I think the most of them don't understand the complexity of somebody of being made. Most of them don't have any knowledge at all. Maybe they've never hired a trans person, or they don't have a trans person in their organization. They don't even have any policies there. I mean, it's getting better. Some people have some health policies because it's been state mandated, but there's a lot of education needed by people, organizations like mine, to give to organizations in order for them to become educated on pronouns, language, simple things is like having a form that somebody fills out, where it's got all the boxes for people to check.
Right.
And if we
not making assumptions, it sounds like.
You can't make assumptions. And it's just really an education process that I would tell you 99% of it's astounding to me when I talk to companies. It really is. It is. You know, there's a lot of lip service out there. There's a lot of what they call pink washing. You know, you'll see it in June. People are going to be throwing flags all over the place. But it really is about investments. You know, they have to invest. And look, women know this. This is what I tell the trans community all the time. Women know this better than anybody. Your wages are still, what, 18% different than men. Women have been battling this since Adam and Eve, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you find that workplaces, once they show an openness to those that have to being educated and learn, are they, I mean, do you see hope, I guess is what I'm wondering, or do you feel hopeful about our ability to change and grow as a collective, as a culture?
Yeah, well, I feel hopeful in a way with corporations, because I think corporations, you know, we spend a lot of time at work, so it's really important for us to, you know, help work out. I think with our workforce readiness program, what that does is that helps us in the door with corporations also, because corporations do recognize that they need talent, and they do recognize that they need, you know, the most diverse workforce to get the talent. And that the generation coming up, Gen Z, their expectations are sky high. You know, all I wanted to do was be liked, you know, their expectations are a whole lot. So I think with the workforce readiness program, we're able to couple it with our workforce inclusion and say, look, we're creating a pipeline of potential employees for you, but we are not going to let our employees, you know, our cohort members go to you unless we're sure that you're ready, that you have a sense of belonging in your organization. Lots of times, you know, people have HR departments with hiring people, but they don't create that sense of belonging. So, you know, you have to build the sustainability. You know, we come in and we train, but then there's further training that needs to be done where we help people with videos and other, you know, sustainability items so they can ongoing train people.
And my understanding from your training includes interviewing. Is it, I think, also like what to wear to an interview, or the range of outfits that are suitable, quote unquote, I guess, depending on the industry?
Yeah, so we do resume writing, interview preparation, and actually we're meeting tonight. So at 7 o'clock, so it's our 5th week. And we do cover we're trying to help people also with the emotional aspect of, you know, of trends that you're not necessarily fitting in, and that there could be moments where you're misunderstood, such as being misgendered. So you can get misgendered. That could be a really upsetting event for somebody. But when it happens, most times I found that the person isn't looking up, or, you know, the person not. We always think as individuals, everybody's paying attention, but most people are not. Right?
Well, that's such an interesting point. And, you know, I have 2 daughters who are 23 and 26. They both identify as women, and they're both gay. And just their own experience with gender, to your point, it's like many stops on the train, right? And because I have 2 gay daughters, I've had a house full of, actually not very many men in the house, but definitely, you know, their friends, many of whom identify as gay, many of whom identify as non-binary for sure, and some who have identified as trans. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to learn and be educated, even if I have found myself screwing up. And, you know, it's awkward. It's been awkward for me. And I feel so blessed to have the opportunity to get to do better, get to try again, and get to have my kids say, if you screw up with the pronouns, don't fall over yourself apologizing, because then you're centering yourself. So, you know, I feel exposed, and also like how great to, at least I feel like so much, really feel happy to have the opportunity to learn in a way that, you know, there felt like there were fewer opportunities for gender expression for sure when you and I were younger, Jen.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's interesting. So, I talk about this too in terms of, having white privilege, right? So I grew up on Long Island in a town called Massapequa. It's all white. It was white then. It's white now. It'll
Mhm.
probably be white for who knows, however. That doesn't make the people who live there bad, but it doesn't expose me to people of color. And it didn't expose me like I never knew anyone, believe it or not, who was gay.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
so all those things, and then it becomes a real learning process. Now, for me, I put myself all in on this, and I'm teaching sociology. So when I'm teaching, I'm learning at the same time. And
yeah.
it's really been a wonderful experience to be able to learn. And I think that more people should be curious rather than be afraid, right? I mean,
That's the tattoo right there.
yeah.
That really is curiosity replacing fear. I want to keep talking to you, but I'm also going to say to our audience that we would like to be able to open this up now to questions, because I'll bet you have tons of questions for Jen. I'm not even sure who all has signed up. So let me just go to the question thing. Okay, let's see. How do you think, oh, this is for me. This is from Amy Levine. Jenny, how do you think the Revel platform might be open to including trans women? Are there ways that Revel could reach out to older trans women? Do you think there might be any hesitancy around welcoming trans women into the community? So I can't type the answer. I'm not, but anyway, let me just say, Amy, to you who asked the question and to all who might be listening, as a representative of Revel now, we are very open and welcoming of, as I said, anyone who identifies as a woman. And if we make mistakes, or if anyone in the Revel community makes mistakes along the way, we're very open to learning from them. So I can't say, I mean, I'll share very transparently that I posted about this conversation, Jen, that you and I are now having in Revel a couple of days ago, and we got a ton of really supportive comments, because we have a number of groups on our platform, including an LGBTQIA group. There's like 30 different groups, and there were many women who were just so grateful. And we had one comment that was hostile. So I was grateful for the opportunity to respond to that comment right away and say, this is not acceptable in our community. And I'm saying this publicly. And if we get any other hate comments, they're going to be deleted. But I want to be transparent right now about what Revel expects. So, so to Amy's question, Amy, that we, I don't know that there wouldn't be some hiccups in some situation, but we feel very committed on a day-to-day practice, as of day-to-day practice, to practicing inclusivity and to dealing with bumps as they come up. And as Revel, like leadership staff people, really doing everything we can to make anyone who identifies as trans, non-binary feel welcome. Let's see. I think we answered that. Any other questions from anyone else? We'll just keep I'm going to keep my eye on that chat box and ask you, I heard from Amy, Jen, I love this, that a little bit about your own family life, and that you have a wife, Nancy, who's a devotee of punk rock and works for the MTA. Is that correct?
She is a mechanic for the MTA.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Mechanic. She works in a bus depot. It's really quite a story. I mean, I guess I'll tell you the personal side. So yeah. I was married for 30 years. My ex kind of knew a little bit, but there were no words back then, so neither of us really knew. We didn't get divorced over my gender, because I didn't even know back then. Divorced now for 10 years. We got divorced just because we fell out of love. I think 30 years is a pretty good thing to be able to have with somebody. For sure. For sure. We had a daughter. We have a daughter. She's now 22. We actually adopted her. It was a wonderful thing to be able to adopt her. And my daughter is, was very supportive. So when I first came, and maybe I should go back to my other family too. So I was born into a family. At that time, there were 6 of us. At that time, there were 5 boys and 1 girl. Now there's 4 boys and 2 girls. Actually, one of my brothers passed away. I'm Irish, I'm Hungarian, and I'm Catholic. I say those things because culture plays a part in how people react to somebody being sexuality or somebody's gender.
Mhm.
So, you know, when I decided to come out, the first two people I needed to tell, number one was my daughter. The second person was my ex-wife.
Mhm.
And my daughter was extremely supportive. And I think without that, I would have had a lot of trouble. It was, I absolutely adore her.
Do you
So,
think your daughter knew on some level? Was she shocked or did she have an idea?
no, no, she knew because we were living together. I had 50% custody of her.
Mhm.
And, you know, I used to have things delivered to the house. And she sort of, you know, she sort of figured things out. You know, you can never keep anything from kids.
Right.
So they sort of know. So
I understand she still calls you dad. Is that right?
she does. And Nancy, my wife, has three girls and they call her dad.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
And my wife is a lot different than me. I don't know if it's jokingly, but we agree on this. She calls me the girl in the relationship. So she, she's got a lot of masculine traits. She's this tiny little thing. She's absolutely beautiful. She's going to be 65. She looks like she's about 40. It's amazing.
This is Nancy you're talking about?
And she has all the energy in the world. And I don't really have that much energy.
You look like you've got a lot of energy to me. I also hear that you have an amazing 91-year-old mother-in-law, a French grande dame type who you call Frenchie.
Yeah, Frenchie. I call her mom because I like to be respectful, but she doesn't mind. She's 92. We're actually moving in with her. So mom fractured a hip. She's another one. She's amazing. She fractured a hip like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, healed on its own. She stopped working just like 2 years ago. She still drives. She's been living on her own, but she's up like 20 stairs and we don't want her there anymore. So we're all moving in together. She calls us the odd couple, not because of the fact that we're transgender, because I'm so much larger than Nancy is. And we've got two distinct personalities. I'm very calm and my wife is not as calm as I am. So we always joke about it. It's going to be, we're going to do some videos. It'll be Frenchie and the odd couple.
I love the way you've lived your life. It just feels it's so inspiring and galvanizing for any of us, I think, looking to lay claim to our true selves, especially later in life. It just feels, I don't know, it gives me good cheer, Dr. Jen.
Yeah, so this is the wonderful part. So I would like to talk a little bit about youth. TransNewYork, we are advocating for them. We're not doing that much work with youth, but I think it's important to talk about because we have a lot of folks who are on here. I'm sure we have a lot of moms, we have aunts of people have nieces, brothers, sisters, whomever, sisters, kids. So there's 125 anti-trans bills right now. And let me explain something. Some of these bills, well, I would say all of them are really, really dangerous. They're really dangerous. What we have in our society now is, you know, we've opened up, right? We've opened up in a good way. You were talking about this before. We opened up in a good way in accepting. We're accepting LGBTQ people in a lot better way. Then we have the internet. Now we have kids coming in at younger ages, right smack in the middle, in the most important part of their life, developmental, socially developmental, psychology and everything else as well. So those kids today who are coming out, they need the most support of anybody because, you know, for me, when I lost one of my friends, and I have, it was very sad, but that doesn't compare to a 13-year-old who's going to be devastated if they lose people or if they're bullied. There's anti-trans legislation, and I just want to say, so like, let's say, Jenny, your daughters, you have, or your, let's say you had grandkids. I don't know if you don't, but let's just say you did, and they were 10 or 12 years old, and they wanted to transition, let's say in Idaho. It's against the law. They couldn't go and get medical care or gender affirming surgeries. And if you did it, you'd be brought up on child abuse charges. And so would the medical doctor. So would the medical doctor. And if you went across state lines in the state of Idaho, you could go to jail for life.
Mhm.
This is America. I mean, it's almost astounding that I'm saying this. Now, the thing is, when I was a kid, I went through a time when I wanted to dress. There was no words for this. There was no language. There was no information.
Mhm.
That never left me. And I came out of 56. When kids are thinking about these things, they're not being influenced, you know, give them a little bit more credit. They're not just being influenced by the internet or their friends. This is coming from within.
Mhm.
And give them credit that they're talking to their parents.
Mhm.
Those I never did. So
This is so critical, and it really underscores the importance of the work that you are doing with Trans New York, Dr. Jen. We're going to have to close in a few minutes, but I do notice that we have another question that I'd love to, can I share that with you, to you directly? It's an anonymous question, and here's what it is. I realize that everyone's transition story is different. Still, Dr. Jen, do you see any generational differences in how younger people in the trans community see/view/approach things compared to older people in the trans community? I'm thinking in terms of dead names versus the before Gen approach, or reaching out to help educate non-trans people versus asking non-trans people to educate themselves, etc.
yeah, no, I mean, it's a fabulous question. And it happens to, you sort of didn't ask a question, you kind of told the truth there. So yeah, I mean, that is really out there. And when we're working with the workforce readiness program, is trying to sort of get through to everybody that, yes, it's not fair, we're a minority, life is not fair, but at some point we have to join with others to help us and to help educate. You cannot have an expectation that everybody's going to understand, because it's new. Most people don't, particularly when we're referencing, gender diverse folks. That's all brand new for people. So I think that younger people, and I know I was like this, like when you're young, you always feel like, this is it, this is the you, and you don't want to be impeded in any way. And you want to sort of not have that life before. And that's fine for an individual, you can feel that way. But we can't impose our wills and thoughts on other people, not if we want them to join with us.
Mhm.
If you want this to be part of a conversation, you've got to be open to the conversation. And we have to be just as empathetic as we're seeking empathy.
That's a beautiful note to end on, because we do have to end. I feel like I could easily talk with you for another hour. It really feels it's sobering and delightful and hopeful and helpful to speak with you, Jen. So if people want to reach out to you, how do they find you?
Oh, okay. So they can reach me at Trans New York. That's TRANS, New York spelled out, NEWYORK.org.
Mhm.
Or you can email me. I always like emails. And that's G for my first name, Gennifer, GHERLEY, which is my last name, at transnewyork.org.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you very much. Oh, look, we've got one more question. I just want to get it in. I know I'm sure. Oh, do you talk at schools? Yes.
Yes, and it's interesting. I may be doing a big event with a big real estate company. So we're trying to sort of branch out to everywhere we can and get to schools. And I think I would love to be in front of. I have a Northwell Hospital may help me with this. I'd love to be in front of PTA groups.
So important.
People meet somebody like myself. They have a little bit of a different context. If you've never met anybody, it's difficult.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Jen Herley, thank you so much. It's been really just a privilege to speak with you and hear from you on Revel's Raging Gracefully podcast. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I look forward to keeping abreast of your good work and doing the work that I need to do to support you and the trans and non-binary community.
Thank you, Jenny. And everybody remember, we need allies. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
Okay, take good care.